you go. Yeah.
Well, you know what? Why don't we? It's at 2:00. Why don't we get started here? So first of all, I'd like to thank everybody that is here. We'll go through some introductions right away, but I just want to give a special thank you to the John Humphrey Center for Peace and Human Rights for having us here to discuss such an important part of the solution. I mean, when you're doing the works of human rights advocacy, there's often seems to be a gap in the conversation. And when it comes to technology and novel approaches to, how are we going to do this? How are we going to solve these problems? So, that's why we're really excited. We're honored that they asked the Canadian Blockchain Consortium to come here and talk about the possibilities of a new economy. So, without further ado, I will go last this time, but I would like our panelists to introduce themselves. And I'm going to go ladies first, and I'm going to go top left. So I don't know what you guys have, but Alexis, why don't you start us off?
Sure. Thank you so much, Jade. It's just fantastic to be here at the Ignite Change conference. I couldn't agree more that this is just such an important topic. And it's a real privilege for us to be asked to contribute something to this dialogue. So my name is Alexis Pappas, and I'm the Chief Innovation Officer at a Canadian blockchain company called Guild1. And we focus on applying smart contracts, tokenization, and other blockchain technologies to managing and reducing emissions in the oil and gas sector, as well as verifying carbon credits from diverse sources, including industrial and nature-based projects. I'm really pleased to be the chair of the ESG committee at the consortium, where we've developed a multidisciplinary coalition to research and promote different types of blockchain solutions for a better world, including sustainability and financial equity. And I also work closely with the Northern Alberta Institute of Technology on different blockchain educational programs designed to build competency in this really important technology here in Alberta.
Well, that's awesome. And I've known you for a while, and I'm excited that we've spoken on many panels before, and this is just another honor for me. And I mean, everybody here has been on Telling It Like It Is. So what next up? Hubert, why don't you go?
I thought you said ladies first.
No, I did. They went first. Now we're second.
Oh, what happened to Koleya?
Yeah.
Okay. Koleya,
what are you trying to say?
Everyone knows Koleya, but
yeah,
I guess maybe I'm not. Actually, I won't go there. I was going to make a bad joke, but save that one. But well, it's a pleasure to be here. Definitely grateful that this conference asked for the Blockchain Consortium and many of our amazing members and partners to speak on this panel today. Definitely, as Alexis said, I echo it, impactful topic. The Canadian Blockchain Consortium, so we are the largest not-for-profit kind of ecosystem advocacy organization in Canada. We boast over, I think we're closing on around 90 members right now. We host events all across the country, and we advocate to our federal, provincial governments, as well as regulators and industry on the vital importance and impact that this transformational technology is going to have today and in the future. So I'm excited to be here and share whatever knowledge I can.
Awesome. Now, Hubert, you're up.
Oh, okay. All right. Now that the ladies have gone. Hubert Lau from 𝗕𝗃𝘄 Inc. We are a publicly traded company on the TSX Venture Exchange. Our mission and goal in life is to create a world where we can trust more, waste less, and reward sustainable practices. And blockchain is part of the whole equation of our solutions. But for us, it really comes down to not only about food traceability and food safety, but now about food insecurity, like access to food, and knowing that there is, just in Canada alone, about 6.9 million people who cannot get nutritious, healthy food because of many reasons. We have to take that into consideration every day in everything we do. Alexis works very closely with Nate. I do too, but in a different role. So I am this year's exec in residence for Nate. And my role is to help encourage entrepreneurship with the student body, not just the technology students and the business students, but the trade students, the health services, healthcare students, and everyone else that is within the NAIT campus. And I'll just say my passion is looking for ways to make a better world for all of us. And I know my fellow panelists, I don't even know if that's the right word anymore, fellow, but okay, my panelists are the same way and they have the same passions. And I think I'm looking forward to today. So thank you for the opportunity to be on this prestigious panel. And last thing I would say is I want to celebrate that 75th anniversary of the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which I think it's so important for every one of us and all of our future generations. Thank you.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And those are three great introductions. And I'm not going to say you're panelists. We're all friends here. We've all known each other for a long time. And this is just going to be a really good discussion. And I'm excited to be here and moderate it and hopefully contribute a little bit. But my name is Jade Alberts, and I wear a few hats. I consider myself a serial entrepreneur, and I've been lucky enough to be part of 4 exits. And a current company is Peer Guidance, which is a purpose before profit company that operates as a company, that fractional business team that helps people grow and scale, but we don't want capital to get in the way. I'm also an active angel investor with working and making investments in clean tech, life science, ag tech. And I act as a mentor for University of Calgary, the Ag Fund, SVG Ag, and Plug and Play. So I also am the vice president of the Canadian Blockchain Consortium. So I've been proud to call Koleya a partner for the last 5 years and work closely with everybody on this panel. And I'm extremely excited to get into the conversation now that we've got those introductions over. And because I mean we all live and eat and breathe blockchain, no pun intended there, a lot in our lives. And we've been able to see that what it's been able to offer, not only from food but decentralized finance and a lot of other things. So we're going to talk about a few other maybe potential social impacts and create new ways for people to organize around, solve these complex problems. So the first question that we're going to get to is globally there are more than 1 billion people that are considered invisible, a term often used for people who have no access to government identification. How would you describe the connection between identity credentials, poverty, human rights, and what role blockchain can play in helping resolve this major global problem? And Koleya, why don't you kick us off?
Oh, thanks for that one. This is totally an Alexis question. I'm really handing it over to Alexis first.
No, pass the buck. We're good to go.
I'm passing the buck.
Okay. Yeah, sure. I mean, it's kind of crazy to think about a world in which 1/7 of the global population doesn't have something that we all take for granted and we all use to do pretty much everything, whether it's education or employment or voting or accessing healthcare. Without identity, people are really restricted in what they can do, in what services they can access. And it's one of the chief factors locking so many people around the world into a life of poverty. So you really can't understate the importance of having identity credentials. And a majority of people who lack identity globally are women. This has a hugely disproportionate impact on women. And in some countries around the world, because of their lack of identity, women actually can't even confer citizenship onto their children. And so you have people who are displaced in the land that their parents were born in and that they were born in simply because they can't verify who they are. Even when people have identity in the traditional paper form, there are enormous risks to that. There have been so many cases that have come out in the news over the last couple of years about people working in different countries around the world who have their identity documents stolen by employers. So there are a lot of risks to traditional forms of identity, even for those people who do have access to it. So what blockchain enables is portable digital credentials that people own, that people carry with them, and that only they can use and share. So this provides this layer of security that protects people from exploitation, which is, one of the biggest risks to not having identity, as well as prevents people from stealing that identity and prevents people from holding that identity to lock people into indentured servitude or slavery. this is really going to be the key to the next development of the decentralized economy and Web3, which is commonly called, the internet, where people own their own identity, as well as, own the very infrastructure of the internet. And so tremendously important. It's going to have a huge economic impact. And as anyone with a mobile phone and an internet connection is able to prove who they are, what their educational credentials are, and what services they can access, it's going to lift a lot of people out of poverty.
That's awesome. I'm going to add to that a little bit, just because I want to give more, even a deeper context for everyone. What Alexis just says, I think some people may think, oh, that's out there in the third world, far away from us. It doesn't happen in North America. But I would say years ago, I was approached with the investment opportunity for ATM machines in the US. And I was like, why would you do that? And it was about the unbankable people who are so poor that the banks would not put a facility in their community. So there's no way for them to cash checks. There's no way for them to send money back home. There's no way to pay their bills. And so they had to do all of that via the ATM machines. And this is before e-transfer and so forth, that's more convenient in cell phones now. But if you kind of think about it, this is less than 10 years ago. And we have people in the US that others will look to take advantage of by providing very high service fee equipment so that they could have basic services. And so what Alexis just talked about is so critical, that if we don't look at these type of infrastructures right here at home in Canada and in the US, we are still going to have that same problem. So it's not a far away problem that we can let others think about. We need to take charge of that.
I would just quickly add to Hubert's point that cybersecurity is another major risk that's impacting people in North America. Apple just recently released a study showing that over the last 2 years, 2.1 billion people's personal identity and financial information has been made public in data breaches. So that's another thing that impacts us here. Sorry, Koleya, please go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to give a little bit more context. I know Hubert brought it back into North America, but in North America, we are rather quite privileged in the fact that, at least if you live in Canada and you live in the States, you've generally had pretty decent access to banking services, financial services, right down to if you want to procure a home, land titles might only, they're still, it's lengthy, but potentially up to 3 months, where if you go into some third world countries where they don't have the same kind of infrastructure that we do here, there's places, there was one place that actually did a kind of like a test on a blockchain for land titles. And it was for people who are in kind of impoverished areas where they didn't have any written notes of title. There was nothing to actually prove that that land was theirs, except for the fact that they basically had the equivalency of squatters' rights. They'd been on that land for multi-generations, but they had no security on that land. And they also, because they couldn't show proof of ownership of this land, they couldn't access financial services like leverage with like a bank loan or something to secure against that particular asset. The danger there is someone could come in that was, stronger or aggressive, remove these people from their land, and there was also no recourse that could be taken from it. So in this small area in South Africa, when they did this, they were able to speed up land title confirmations. I think it was from 50 to about 200, so 4 times the speed within a single year, allowing families to get access to loans or microloans to actually help these struggling families get out of impoverishment, or at least, if anything, secure the fact that they could maintain on that land for multi-generations. Now, we don't see that in North America, but the impacts that blockchain could have for credentials and being able to prove ownership, being able to prove who you are and verify yourself. There is a huge amount of value that can have in third world countries. In first world countries, I mean, there's definitely things that would have been beneficial, especially if we think about it in the healthcare space. I mean, a lot of stuff is still manual data entry, and there's still, as we are human beings, we are prone to, making mistakes on occasion. But mistakes in the healthcare space, if they input a medication incorrectly, that could cost you your life. So being able to verify and validate who you are, making sure that your records, are in a digital database that you own. Say you had to travel from Alberta to Atlantic Canada to seek medical care, they'd be able to see, the entire history of your medical care. They'd be able to see the medications that you've been on and make sure that you have proper treatment, say if you weren't able to verbally advocate for yourself. So there's definitely still value in the first world country, but exponential value in areas that aren't.
So I didn't really know what it was, which ended up leading to me meeting Koleya and becoming involved in the blockchain world. So there's something really good came of it. But I'm fascinated what's going on in the world, not fascinated, devastated what's going on in the world. And we talk about that digital identity, then people have to leave their homes, have to leave on a moment's notice. And if they have to go to another country, they're not going to be, have a label or a title behind them. And here's who I am, here's who I am, here's my family. And I'm going to be able to hopefully have some of my, money, on decentralized. So I'm actually able to pick up and start and maybe have to start over a new life. But the one thing that kind of I always, bothers me, and you hear about it and you get into the politics of the world, is why isn't this happening? I know this is not on the question, but this is always bothering my mind. And I've got three brilliant minds here that I would like to dive into. Why do you think government is so slow on actually wanting to bring this technology to make the world a better place?
Oh, you want to dive down that rabbit hole, Jade? Well,
why not?
the second that you start adding, the world, it's a complex system. And when you start trying to put few individuals in charge of a multi-layered, highly complex system that believe in a bureaucracy structure, and bureaucracy is a very slow moving beast. It's incompetence. Most governments are just frankly incompetent. And you look at third world countries where they are able to not only leverage their incompetence, but take bribes and do all kinds of things where they're not specifically there to benefit their people. We've seen multiple regimes where the heads of government are making insane amounts of money, living an absolutely stunning lifestyle, where their people are impoverished and poor and can't get access to freaking clean water, electricity, or just basic human rights. So I don't know, you want to go down the road of government, not so much in a first world country, but you start getting into these third world countries where there's so much corruption, and the corruption is so multi-generational. I don't think it's so much that they don't care to give it to their people. It's just the level of government incompetence that is out there on a global scale is exponential right now. And there's so many communist regimes. It's absolutely crazy. Like you saw what happened in Nigeria. In Nigeria alone, this is a blockchain use case right here. They tried to introduce central bank digital currencies overnight. They told Nigerian people who are 86% paper money, you require somewhere around 80 of their dollars per week or per day to be able to operate in that particular economy. They're purely cash based in this area. On a Friday, they told them on their ATMs, nope, you're no longer going to be able to access to withdraw more than 35 of your dollars per week, effectively crashing the economy overnight to introduce something the Nigerian people did not want nor need, nor had the technological resources to implement. That level of government incompetence was crazy. They had riots for months until the point where, and they started burning their cash just to try and get it out of the economy, where they actually had to end up bringing it back. Now, what individual in the right mind would have done that to an economy that was not ready to go from cash to digital, did not have the infrastructure for it, and the people did not want it? That's a really prime example of trying to bring something in that was really not needed, based on a few government people deeming it necessary. Mm-hmm. Sorry, that's a tangent. I don't know.
Wow, that is a loaded commentary, and I love it. So let's dive into this. Come on, Alexis, you go, and then I'll go.
Okay, well, my take isn't as hot as Koleya's take. So Coming from the oil and gas industry, one of the things that we see in a lot of traditional sectors, as well as in a lot of governments, both in the West as well as the developing world, is that you have a lot of very expensive legacy infrastructure, which has been managing these processes, maybe not in a very efficient way, maybe not in a very cost-effective way, but is sort of limping along. And the challenge of replacing that legacy infrastructure is massive. So for a system like digital identity, this requires a complete restructuring of the government agencies that currently manage identification. It requires more communication in between very siloed government agencies that currently manage this data. It requires the replacement of digital infrastructure, cloud services, on-prem services that might have cost, many tens of millions of dollars, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, and are on contracts that might last 10, 15 years into the future. So this is one of the big challenges. There are a lot of use cases that start a little bit smaller. The benefits are proven out, and then they grow and gradually replace this infrastructure. But these changes take a lot of time and a lot of technology change management strategy to navigate. And I think in the case of governments, they're not incentivized to do this very quickly because they're not going to benefit a lot if those changes succeed necessarily. And they're definitely going to be blamed if they fail. But what we are seeing in the global south and developing countries is that, for some use cases, they lack legacy infrastructure. If you have a country that, as Koleya was talking about, has no current data management system for land titles, then it's pretty easy to move straight to a digital system. You're not replacing anything. You're not running two different systems at the same time to make sure the digital one works and maintaining both of those costs. So I would say legacy infrastructure replacement and navigating massive changes are two really big hurdles.
Yeah, thanks for your comment. And the government question is actually a really good one, Jade. And number one is, if you just look at, I think over the course of my lifetime, I've done over 1,000 different rollouts of just IT systems. And it's very disruptive when you're rolling out. And just the last few days, we're talking to a lot of our customers about a software that is 30 plus years old. And the reason why we didn't replace it yet is because it's so stable, it works, customers love it. We have users who are 80 years old because they've been using it for 30 years. And we're asking them to change over. And we know it's going to be extremely disruptive to their business when they do that because it's their ERP system. And so if you look at just from a small business, like one business is already disruptive. If you try and change a whole government, that's a lot of people. And like Koleya is saying, is that there's you got individuals who may not fully understand, nor have they done the research of what to do and how to do it, so that they could make totally incorrect decisions for many different reasons. Then if you look at political structures, if you're a democratic country, are you sure you're going to be in power in 4 years' time? Well, if you're not, or even if you are, you start the process, and as soon as you're elected out, what does the new government want to do? They want to do it their way. So you get this on and off situation. And for years, India suffered from that. And that's why for years, India did not have new airports, did not have road systems, did not have a lot of things. Now you think about what blockchain and when we're talking about digital currencies or any other blockchain type systems like identifications and so forth, is those take a lot of planning. You got to be in a political structure that is not going to be on and off. So there's got to be commitments. Mm-hmm. And so if you've got a dictatorship or you've got a communist government, I can't comment on the Nigeria one because I'm not read up on it. But I do know when I used to, before COVID, when I used to spend a lot of time in China with the government officials there, the biggest thing they do is they plan 50 years ahead. And this is why, compared to countries like India, the infrastructure for China is so strong. Their highways is like our highways in North America, smooth, straight lines, everything is safe, minimal potholes and so forth. And they can go deep into their infrastructure. So if you can't plan 50 years in advance, then when you're trying to make these type of significant digital changes, it's going to be an issue. So personally, I really feel it's not government that needs to be the innovators and the leaders. It's got to be private industry. So what 𝗕𝗲𝘄 is doing in the oil and gas industry should help government figure out what they want to do in those industries, or apply some of the learnings of the successes of the smart contracts and how they're being implemented in an industry level, and applying it into different industries and slowly moving into the government system. But if the government is the innovator, you're hooped, because they have no experience, no time to get that right. And I would say, as human beings, all of us, no matter how smart or not we are, we need time to learn to figure out what's working, what's not. Even if it's logical on paper, when you implement it, we know this, when you implement it, you'll find the gotchas, because the devil's in the detail.
Yeah, I agree, especially government. They're usually in it for themselves. This is a little biased, but maybe short-term thinking, not long-term thinking. Everything that you said, that what China is doing, thinking 15 years out, that's nothing that politicians think. They're thinking, what's going to get me elected again in 4 years, and bringing something that people may not understand or might take a lot of time to change is probably no one cares about. And
like 50 years, how many of us are going to be around still working in 50 years? Our plan is not to be. Right, but if you can think that, then there's multi-generational thinking, and that's the level that we need to get to, and we need to really think in terms of, like, when we're talking about these systems. Yes, blockchain is critical. I think all of us agree, is revolutionary if it's implemented properly. But that's a big if, and it will take time, because we're talking about government. But if we talk about private industry, whole different game. That's a different topic.
There's also, I think it's important to take into account where we are. Even in, with private industries, even in the oil and gas industry, in the food services industries, there's an incredible amount of paper documents. I mean, we're not fully digitalized, and that's a precondition for being able to use blockchain. You've got to have, digital data that's relatively organized and readable, available in the cloud. And a lot of industries, as well as governments, simply don't have that, or if they have it, it's only in relatively recent years. So there's got to be a big push to get everyone, to fulfill the preconditions of being able to adopt blockchain before trying to implement, much larger and more complex changes.
Well, not even just blockchain. You want to get into it. I mean, realistically, like IoT, machine learning, all these other things, there's really no technological transformation that you can honestly make if you don't start digitizing records. And like you're right, Alexis, the antiquated systems, that legacy systems that include government, provide are not really conducive to the newer technological economy that we're trying to move into. But yeah, it's definitely pretty interesting how, like, even in the logistics field, the amount of paper that's still touched. Like, you transport like a mug from here to Asia, and you could have 350 hands touching it, all having to do some form of manual paper entry to move it forward. And like the amount, like what do they say? There's almost $3 billion in logistics losses every single year just from that side of the space, and then what blockchain could do for that. But again, another legacy industry that, wasn't exactly competently set up to start with in a lot of ways, that still is very antiquated.
Yeah.
Stuff.
The founder of the Hyperledger organization, which is one of the biggest blockchain platforms for business use cases, said a couple of years ago that we're at the beginning of a 20 to 50 year maturation and evolution cycle of the technology. So we are really just at the beginning. And, as much as we know all of the amazing things it's capable of, it's important to, consider where we are in that development process.
That's a great point, because I think most of us are old enough to remember when internet first started. I remember like TELUS used a system called Prof, and it was so exciting to be able to text somebody not at the office, right? And you're like, oh, well, I can send them a message. And I remember early days of internet, you dial-ups, and you're talking, what is that HTML, and what's it used for? Why? Who would ever look at it, right? And like I remember those conversations, like, why and why am I paying for this modem that screeches and it makes all these weird sounds, and what are we ever going to do? But there were always the dreamers that said, well, one day we could do e-commerce, one day we can do transactions, we can communicate, we can, and that sound like sci-fi. So when you read back in the early days of sci-fi, that's what it was. But it took 30 years to get to where we are today.
Yeah.
Even that, you and I are probably the only two here that needed two keys to operate a car back in the day.
Yeah.
One to open it, one to start it.
It's so true. One to start, one to lock the door.
Here's a little history note for your comment, Hubert. So there were the dreamers, the people who absolutely believed that a new digital economy was coming right from the 1950s, when you had it was two computers in Nevada and one in California that started communicating. Mm-hmm. And some of you may know him, but in the blockchain space, at least in the Bitcoin world, the man is considered like an OG, but Phil Zimmermann. Mm-hmm. So he started out PGP, it's like pretty good programming, and was pretty much like the godfather of 𝗕𝗃256, which is basically the cryptographic sequencing that Bitcoin's blockchain is run off of. But thanks to World War II, with the invention of the Enigma machine, when cryptography, or encryption, and for those of you who are used to hearing the word encryption, it's cryptography, became digital, it went on the US munitions list. And that's where it stayed. So when the world became digital, Phil Zimmermann went, okay, so if this is a possibility, we're going to need security, right? Which is now going to be a part of digital identity, but you're going to need security for your digital ID in the future. So he started advocating to have stronger cryptographic sequencing that was available to the public, 1980s. When he started doing this work. And it was a civil rights movement that took him over 20 years and all the way up to the Supreme Court to try and get more than, I think it was like 46 or 56-bit encryption available to the general public, because the NSA had designed something called DES, which is a data encryption software that was like 46 or 56-bit encryption. But of course they had a backdoor into it. And he's like, that's not good enough. That's not strong enough. So it was actually in the year 2000, Bill Clinton signed off on taking cryptography off the US munitions list. But they actually did a global hackathon to hack the NSA. And once they could hack it in less than 24 hours, they were able to actually, the NSA was like, okay, fine, you can use stronger encryption services. And 6 years after that, Bitcoin's blockchain release was 𝗕𝗃256. So it's really, really interesting. Like now in this world, as we talk about digital identity and safeguarding your privacy and security, like we have people who have been advocating and fighting for people's ability to have ownership and security of, their digital footprint, I guess now for 40 years?
Yeah, this is actually like kind of a good segue, Koleya, because Carrie in the audience is asking for like an overview on crypto, like as an extension of what you were saying. Do you want to take that one?
I think we should
actually specifically an overview on crypto.
Yeah. I think.
Well, why don't we just get into, like, the next question will probably get into a little bit about crypto, right? Like we could probably do a crypto 101 course, and we actually have some really good crypto 101 courses on Bitcoin 101 courses that we could actually share with people, and maybe I'll dig it up here while we talk about the next question. But I mean, the digital asset side of it, have been, the distribution of relief funds and other people needing on what successful examples of how blockchain finance has helped address the challenges of ensuring how either displaced or impoverished people can, securely access either aid or their funds as they may have to move around the world. So maybe we can build a little bit of a history into this question as well. So we just don't talk about the history of Bitcoin or things like that, but how, maybe a little touch base on how it started and how hopefully it can, help people that are, impoverished around the world.
Oh, I love this question. Okay, so I guess we will build a little history into it.
Yes.
And this actually comes with one of our previous questions, which was complex systems and your government, and where I find the majority of government incompetence originates in the economics perspective of it. Yes. So globally speaking, we operate in the world on something called Keynesian economics, right? So it's a lot around spend theory. The government believes that if we add money into the economy, if we stimulate the economy through finances, we're going to create economic stability or economic growth. That has pretty much financially collapsed every single economy around the world. A really good example of that would be in Venezuela, where they printed so much money that they devalued their currency to the point where there really is not much. Like it's at such an exponential rate that if you get a Venezuelan paycheck, you should cash it out that day, because tomorrow you'll probably be able to buy a little bit less. So when crypto came out, or Bitcoin's blockchain, right? So a lot of people hear Bitcoin, they hear blockchain, and why are those two things combined? Because the white paper for Bitcoin was released in 2008 by a group of developers that gave themselves a pseudonym called Satoshi Nakamoto. And it was in response to the financial crisis that was happening. Now, what was going on there? I think we had 0% interest rates, subprime mortgages, all kinds of things were happening. But again, more money was introduced to the system than could substantiate the amount of value that was sitting within the system. And there ended up being an issue. Hyperinflated the money supply, not enough interest rates. We ended up in a recession. Where Bitcoin came in, or the idea behind it, came from Austrian economics or sound money principles. Basically, you can only spend what you have. So you wouldn't be able to utilize your credit card, or you go out and buy a home. When you do that, the bank's not lending you money that currently exists in a vault somewhere and it's being safeguarded. The bank is just introducing more cash into the ecosystem or the money supply by increasing our debt ceiling, going, okay, you now get access to $500,000 that's not substantiated by anything that you're now going to pay interest rates on. Every credit card does the same thing. Every time you apply for more credit, you are increasing the money supply. So the banks are doing this on a daily rate, and we've increased our money supply since COVID by over 200 times. It's not sustainable. It's why you're seeing the cost of food go up so much. It's why you're seeing the cost of housing go up so much. You're seeing it because there's more and more dollars chasing fewer and fewer goods, and that's not sustainable. So Bitcoin has a finite amount. It's a scarce asset, right? It's kind of similar to gold, but unlike gold, we have known scarcity of Bitcoin. So when that was introduced, they wanted to find a way of taking a tangible physical version of gold and digitizing it in this new financial economy that had an opportunity for people to invest either early on or find a way to move their money into something that actually had, real scarcity, right? So it operates in all the levels of money that's required. It has a unit of account, it's a medium of exchange, and it has a store of value. Now, it's taken 14 years, but it's the top performing asset class in the world. But again, there's only 21 million of them. You can't produce any more of it. And it's been able to maintain its value, slowly growing up over time. It's not a get-rich-quick scheme by any far stretch of the imagination. It's not something that you should just willy-nilly invest in and think you're going to become a billionaire overnight. It is a store of value asset class that you would want to hold long-term as a form of money, realistically. But it came out in a response to an unstable financial situation that's been created by governments all around the world, by people who wanted to see sound money or a gold standard come back, right? So it's a very highly secure. Bitcoin's blockchain has never actually been hacked. As much as centralized exchanges, you've seen losses. That's through exchanges, but that's not Bitcoin's blockchain specifically. So it's very secure, it can't be hacked. It's a very scarce asset, and it's also a very well-performing asset, but it's basically considered a form of digital gold. Little bit of history on it there, but if you start kind of studying or getting into economics, you kind of have an understanding. If you look at Austrian versus Keynesian, Bitcoin's blockchain is based on that economic principle, which is very, very sound. And if you think about even going back a little further into history, if you look at the gold standard, we had the gold standard for about 5,000 years. And when people knew that their money had value long-term, they saved when they bought the car all at one time, or they saved and they could afford to buy the house, right? Nowadays, people don't save anymore. They're so eager to be able to just spend whatever they can as quick as they can. I think they said the average North American by the age of 35 is over $60,000 in debt. You wouldn't have seen that 100 years ago. It wouldn't have even been possible because we have no trust in our money anymore because we can't trust our governments not to spend it. Example here, our federal government introduced our money in supply, increased it by 200 times since COVID started. That's an insane amount of money to be introduced to the economy. Absolutely insane. Bitcoin, Bitcoiners consider Bitcoin the solution to that. Sorry, my tirade. But
Tirade. That's okay. There's no such thing as a tirade. It's a good start. Who wants to go next?
Yeah. Well, and from Bitcoin, the original digital asset based in blockchain technology, tens of thousands of different types of cryptocurrencies have emerged. And one of those, back to your question, Jade, are stable coins, which are blockchain-based digital assets that are pegged to something else of value. Often they're pegged to the US dollar or a commodity or something that has, a value with not a lot of volatility. And then the main utility for those types of digital assets is for things like cross-border payments. So because of the enormous challenges of distributing aid to refugees, if you think about leaving a war-torn country, all of a sudden your local bank is shut down. You might not be able to access any of your accounts remotely. There might be sanctions or other issues that impact your ability to access financial services. And when it comes to aid distributed by agencies like the UN, they might not even know how to get in touch with you or find you, especially if you also lack identification. So because all digital assets require is internet connection, a mobile phone, smartphone, and a wallet that can hold those assets in that phone, it's a much easier way of distributing aid across borders without having to rely on infrastructure that might be severely disrupted. So one of the big use cases over the last couple of years is the UN piloted this award-winning project. It won Best Impact Award at Paris Blockchain Week, which is one of the world's biggest blockchain conferences, to distribute stablecoins to Ukrainian refugees in partnership with, I believe it was Western Union. So what happened was that people who were displaced were able to go online, sign up for a wallet, and then they would receive aid funds in their wallet, and then they could exchange them for cash at Western Union. And so this was a completely borderless way of sending money that also didn't rely on being able to convert the money or, worry about exchange rates and all those other issues with cross-border transactions. And actually, Koleya, you mentioned Venezuela earlier. There was a really interesting pilot a couple of years ago where a big blockchain exchange called Circle worked with the US government to send aid to Venezuelans using stablecoins in a way that bypassed conventional banking infrastructure in Venezuela because the government was, actively trying to prevent this aid from being sent. So in cases where people are completely disrupted because of war, it facilitates these simple borderless transactions that don't rely on a lot of infrastructure. And in cases where governments are part of the problem and actively trying to prevent people from getting access to aid, it prevents governments from interfering in that process. So there are a tremendous amount of benefits, and I'm excited to see how this use case evolves.
Jill, I loved your example there, Alexis, because when I was talking about food security with some of our senior Canadian officials a while back, one of whom that was in the Alberta government, I love what he used to say to me is that I wish government would understand that if this is a train, private industry should be the engine, the government should be the caboose. Mm. However, when there is an emergency, right, just like what you were just saying there, if there's emergency, the government needs to be the engine and private industry becomes caboose. Now, why is that important? Is that if we reverse the roles there at the wrong timing, then we waste a lot of time, energy, and a lot of mistakes will be made. But if we take your example just now with the stable coins, so there's a state of emergency, government stepped up, they played a role. Instead of letting that be just a use case by itself, private industry should be looking at how do they dovetail off the push and the innovation and the advancement that happened because of that emergency to take it to another level. So if the stable coin starts working very well and you're looking after the refugees, and the refugees are really just independent individuals and families. So from my world and the food world is quite often people say, well, how do we distribute funds to farming communities while protecting their identity, their privacy rights, all kinds of things. And the farmers are very, very cognizant of those things. They don't want just anybody have anything. So what I just heard there is a good example of, the next step of innovation should be to take what happened and apply that into a supply chain where we could reward the producers directly, leveraging what has happened. So again, using private industry to commercialize the base, but if an emergency, don't waste a good crisis, right?
No, absolutely. And I just wanted to comment next to you. Those two classes I posted up there are things that were created by the Canadian Blockchain Consortium. So they're on our YouTube channel. They're open to everyone. So hopefully you'll enjoy them anyway. And even here, Edward put down here that talking about how they're subject to legal tender, USD, stable coins, but he asked, how can crypto break free of this value education and fully replace our current economy? Will we always need this parallel connection to legal tender to determine cryptocurrency's value? And I mean, we've talked about that a little bit here, so I wouldn't mind maybe expanding on that. I mean, everything's talking about stablecoin. There's a lot of talking about ETFs. Canada's at the forefront. We had the first publicly traded Bitcoin fund, first publicly traded Bitcoin ATM fund here in Canada. So I think we're at the forefront of it. Some people might disagree, but I mean, I can say that Koleya and Alexis are two people that get to speak all around the world about what's going on in Canada, what we do great here. So do we think that we will ever be able to determine a legal tender on its own? And do you think maybe not so much Bitcoin on its own, but will we be able to do this?
Globally, we are starting to see a bit of a push. So how do you put it? So on one hand of the fence, there's the central banks that want to come out with a digital dollar, central bank digital currency, and kind of push that through globally. And then on the other hand, you're starting to see third world countries that do have economic instability due to, how they've hyperinflated their currency and effectively devalued it on a global stage. We've seen this in parts of Africa, Latin America, et cetera, that are now deeming Bitcoin as a form of legal tender, right? What does something like that mean? So if to one of our points earlier with the amount of unbanked, right? There's people around the world who are not able to access just basic traditional financial services. They're so poor. When Venezuela, El Salvador. It was the first country to say, yes, Bitcoin's about to become legal tender. When it did, 60% of El Salvadorians were unbanked, right? Did not have access to it. Now, if they had access to a smartphone and a Wi-Fi signal, they automatically could participate in a financial economy, which means remittance payments are huge. People come into first world countries to make money and send it back home to countries where their dollar might not have as much value. And it was estimated that Western Union alone could lose $240 million within a couple of years, just based on a loss in revenues from remittance payments. Now, the infrastructure isn't set up in El Salvador where everybody could have cell phone and Wi-Fi and services like that. So the infrastructure isn't truly there, but it was a start to develop out a financial system that everybody could access without having to have a bank account and participate and be able to send and receive. There's parts of where is it? I think there's blockchains right now that you can actually, without a Wi-Fi signal, you can text and send digital assets, digital dollars that way as well. So there's all kinds of innovations that are coming up to allow for people to participate in this financial economy. I know a lot of people look and go, oh gosh, Bitcoin's unstable or crypto's unstable. It goes up, it goes down, da, 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 da. Now, if you look at it from, historically 2009, when, Bitcoin's first Genesis block was mined up until now, where you have like 15,000 tokens that you could utilize from. But if you just look at the top ones out there, which would like be Bitcoin, Ethereum, and some of the others, the value of it has exponentially grown over a 15-year period of time. It is only increased in value where a local currency, either Canadian, US, Venezuelan, Puerto Rican, even Chinese, that dollar has deflated based on them consistently increasing their money in supply. Crypto in that sense is actually more stable and allows for everybody around the world, regardless of their circumstance, to participate in a new financial economy. So there's huge value for that alone. Here in North America, again, we have access to bank accounts, we have access to credit, we have access to land titles. We're very privileged, right? But in other countries where they do not see that same level of privilege, the idea that now 60% of people could automatically get access to financial products within a day of the government agreeing and saying yes, that's huge. Do I see that happening in more countries around the world? Absolutely. Will it be Bitcoin? I can't say, but to me, it does not make sense to peg your currency against another rampantly inflationary asset like Ethereum or Ripple or something like that, where they can increase the amount of it on demand at any time. You're better off backing it by gold, like something that has some level of scarcity so that your dollar can maintain some value over long periods of time. I would say Bitcoin, gold, the oil reserves in your ground, something tangible will have long-term value. Right now, a lot of countries base it off of what they call GDP or gross domestic product. Basically, the product is the people. That's why you fill out your census reports. How many people are there is based on how much tax revenue they're going to be able to make from you. That amount of tax revenue, they extrapolate long-term and go, we're going to take on this much debt based on this ability to repay it, right? So you are the commodity that your government takes loans and taxes against, where it'd be preferable if they moved it over to something that, actual value that economy creates. Like if you forestry, water, oil and gas, gold, minerals, anything else like that could create more stable value for that dollar than, what they're currently doing with it. So it will eventually happen. If it's a CBDC, it's the same crap as you're currently experiencing right now. So it's another crapshoot that's not going to fix itself. Bitcoin or gold, better options, but will the whole world adapt to that? Probably not, because governments actually like the way that they're able to spend money right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of benefits for sure. And to put that in context, I mean, this is an amazing example of a huge economic shift that comes from the bottom up. One of the patterns that you can see when you look into how cryptocurrencies have been legalized and become accepted in different countries around the world is that so many people are using them that governments have to allow them because they can't stop them. So right now, about 500 million people around the world, and these are just general estimates, own cryptocurrency or have purchased cryptocurrency. A lot of governments, over the last 10 years or so have, tried to restrict access to cryptocurrency. One big example is Nigeria, where a couple of years ago, there were massive protests against police brutality. That was called the SARS movement in Nigeria. And the government shut down the bank accounts of a lot of the people who were organizing these protests or participating in them. These people immediately turned to cryptocurrency, and Bitcoin usage exploded in the country. There was nothing the Nigerian government could do, and eventually they had to accept and regulate it. So people are really driving this out of need on the cryptocurrency side, but you can also see from traditional finance, there's a huge amount of blockchain adoption because it benefits those industries as well. So it's kind of coming from two directions, both top down as well as bottom up. For one example, the tokenization of real assets. So creating digital twins using blockchain technology, kind of in a similar way that cryptocurrencies are programmed, that represent real world assets and can be, broken down and fractionalized and easily traded in a digital way and have a whole bunch of information about that asset attached to the token, are, considered by most of the world's leading banks and financial institutions to be the future of how value is transacted. JP Morgan and Citi and all these other, major institutional financial organizations predict that within the next 5-6 years, more than $5 trillion of value in the global economy is going to be transacted as a blockchain token. So we're seeing adoption coming from all different areas. And I think the important thing to keep in mind is that this adoption needs to benefit ordinary people, and people in the blockchain industry need to advocate for the kind of solutions that aren't just going to benefit big banks and governments and central banks, but also impact, everyday people, especially in countries where there are huge problems with access to identity, access to banking, and access to finance.
Well, the two ladies have got it covered, so I'm just going to do a very short comment. I'm gonna address the latter part of Edward's question, which is, is there always going to be a need to run parallel? And great arguments and discussion from Koleya and Alexis. So I would look at it as, if you're rolling out any sort of technology, especially if you're talking about accounting systems, ERPs, and so forth, what we always want to do is to run them in parallel until we can see the new system is running perfectly. And that will, again, minimize disruption. There's more work in the beginning, a bit of frustration, but you're not going to lose anything. So when with this type of question about the currency, again, you're talking about people's lives and livelihoods. They need to run in parallel until such time the new system is fully proven out and has gone through its ups and downs, and then it comes out and all the little kinks have been figured out. And it's not necessarily technology kinks. Sometimes it's processes. Sometimes it's how we react to it. Sometimes we need to put some additional regulatory frameworks around those. So and adoption, just people understanding what they're buying and what they're using, how to use it. So those type of things take time. And I think once we've kind of worked through it as a country or as a society, I think the traditional currency will get dropped. And it'll get dropped very naturally. Like, it won't be a fight at that point. It'll be like, why do we want to keep doing that? And I would just say, in Asia, you don't really use money anymore, right? They like to tap on their phones or on their devices. In North America, was just adopting that a bit more because of COVID. But prior to COVID, it was just, I know, like, I couldn't even spend my cash because the vendors would not take it. And so it naturally pushed me to keep my money in my account, tapped, off we go, so much easier. I didn't have to worry about having lots of money on me and then getting robbed.
No, and I think there's another question in here, but I want to talk a little bit, because we can talk about fiat currency and digital currency forever, but before we went to this question and kind of went down this rabbit hole, we were really focusing on the smart contracts and how we're going to do things and how they can change things and how we can move food and make it safer in our world. So I'd like to talk about that. So, how do you think, and I don't, whoever wants to start, feel free, but how are some of these going to change the way that we sell our homes, settle land claims? And again, we kind of touched on this, or in general, the way we do business overall.
Well,
I guess you're living in this world, right? With ESG credits and carbon credits, and right?
Well, on the carbon side, and actually I've been working closely with Nate over the last couple of months to develop a course specifically about real estate smart contracts and all of the different applications in the industry. So I'm happy to take a first stab at that because especially in the developing world, what's called land tenure insecurity, when there's no clear title and people can't document, their historical possession or inheritance of land. That's an enormous challenge, both for people's upward, economic mobility, as well as the environment in a lot of cases. And this is something much like digital identity or lack of identity and lack of access to banking that impacts women disproportionately. So what smart contracts enable through something called verifiable credentials is they create a way for people to own their own identity, first of all, and have it instantly verified without needing to look to a central issuer, central authority. And this same principle that we've talked about, earlier in this discussion, also applies to land titles. So you can create, using blockchain and smart contracts, a land title that someone can keep with them in their digital wallet and can be instantly verified against a blockchain registry using the digital signature of the signing authority. So this is an innovation that basically takes land titles out of traditional, error-prone paper-based processes that come with a lot of flaws and can, easily be stolen in some cases or replicated, and turns it into this very secure version of a land title. Koleya earlier mentioned a great project in South Africa. And this is actually something that we talk about in the NATE course on land titles, in the section on land titles in the real estate smart contract course. Over about the last 30 years, there were 3 million homes built in South Africa. And the majority of them, I think about 65%, had no title, no deed, and zero protection for the people who invested in developing that land that in some cases has been in their families for so many years. When you don't have clear title, when you have land tenure insecurity, that means that you can't borrow against that land. It means you can't safely sell that land. It means that everything you do with your property has to operate in kind of a black or gray economy that basically prevents upward mobility and prevents people from progressing economically. And there was an amazing project that she mentioned. It was developed by the Center for Affordable Housing Finance in South Africa in 2019 that registered about 1,000 different properties on blockchain to show how this type of system could work and how this could, kind of maintain that continuity of ownership and give people full formal title to their land. And according to the UN and other international agencies, this is going to be really the key to lifting potentially 2.5 billion people out of poverty, ensuring that they can prove what they own. So very foundational and very important.
Well, anybody have anything to add to that?
Koleya?
No, I think Alexis really.
I know she's got it covered. She's got it covered.
Well, I just did a course. So.
No. I think I love it because from my perspective, because I am always trying to look at it from a digital adoption side. I'm really tired of the let's get very innovative. Let's have these big ideas and talk in terms of 10 years before we can make money. All of those type of things. So in our office right now, we're saying boring is good. Boring is good. And it's not that we don't want to use technology, is that let's look at more practical execution of things. Like and Alexis, that's exactly what you're talking about. It's very tangible benefits that are measurable. That if someone, whether it's a country or a private group or a community wants to implement, they know what they're doing it for, how they're going to do it, and the actual realized benefit. Mm-hmm. And the who's going to pay for it, like how they monetize that, because otherwise it's not financially sustainable. So when we're looking at any of those solutions, and I keep going back to the earlier discussions about, well, you know, how the question really wasn't just about government, but just generally, how do we increase the speed of adoption because the world needs it? Like if we're talking about billions of people would be positively impacted by implementation of a technology to solve a very measurable problem, then the question is, why are we not doing those as fast as we can? And how do we create the collaboration to make that happen? So it's very insightful, and it just generates a lot of thought. And after you speak there, Alexis, I think that's probably why Koleya and I are a little quiet, because it's just like, okay, well, you know, from my side, it's like, well, how do we bring this to life faster?
Well, you said it, Hubert, with collaboration. You know, I mean, you have so many different actors involved in the development of these types of projects. You know, you'll have an NGO, you'll have the government authority in charge of managing current land title systems. You'll have all of these different, you know, property owners who are involved in the project and need to be educated and understand, you know, the benefits of the technology and what their part is. You need financial institutions, you need insurers. I mean, that's why another one of the reasons why blockchain can be so challenging for some use cases, because all of these groups with very different interests and very different roles all have to find a way to work together and to agree on some pretty fundamental principles of how they go about developing a project, which can be challenging. And Edward, I just noticed a question there from you in the chat around the environmental impact or gas cost of using smart contracts for these types of use cases. And I would say that while there are, you know, some use cases that involve the Ethereum blockchain, actually the government of Slovenia recently participated in a blockchain pilot using Ethereum tokens and verifiable credentials for a land registry on Ethereum. In most of the cases, they use permission blockchain networks that don't have associated gas costs at all. So one of the most common is Hyperledger Fabric, which is an enterprise blockchain system. And the reason why this is used for things like land titles is because these ecosystems are closed. So unlike a public chain where anyone can participate by operating a node, in these cases, you have to have the right credentials to be able to access the data in the system. So has a little bit more security in that sense that you can have very private data, which is important for, you know, a lot of government use cases. And in this case, I mean, it's comparable to an ordinary digital, you know, exchange of information as a PDF or something like that. It really doesn't have a very high energy cost, and the costs are mostly associated with the licensing for the permissioned or enterprise blockchain platform, as well as, you know, things like, you know, smart contract programming and, you know, other typical development fees. So yeah, it's just a little bit different type of technology from public chains.
And I think we actually had a mic drop moment there when, well, Alexis, if you can actually make Hubert and Koleya speechless, that's something that I've marked down the date and time. So
as long as I didn't bore them to sleep.
No, not at all. Not at all. I thought it was.
It wasn't that she marked us speechless. She's just like,
no.
She's so eloquent. She's so eloquent. We were just admiring her.
Date and time noted. I'm just letting you know. I'm never going to let you guys forget this.
Alexis has consistently rendered me speechless. Okay, like she is an absolute best of. She's probably one of the most brilliant people I know. So it's hard. It's a hard thing to follow. It's hard. You can't put us both on the fucking panel. She's going to say all the good. I'm sorry. I swear again. All the good things.
You're so sweet. I just saw Edward's follow-up. Yeah, and what I meant by that was that there are no gas fees on most of the types of blockchain platforms that you would use for these types of use cases. So they're, unlike using Ethereum, there would be no specific cost to that contract execution beyond, things like licensing fees and cloud services and the other infrastructure costs of operating the network. There are definitely transaction fees on other types of public chains as well, but that's not my area. I don't know if anyone else wants to take that.
No, I'm good. We could probably go down a rabbit hole if we're going to break that down to exact, joules.
What does it cost to use blockchain? Right? Yeah, that's a rabbit hole for sure.
That's
it is. Most people think there is absolute I know you use Trudeau's statements here, misinformation and disinformation when it comes to Bitcoin mining and energy. Like Bitcoin mining could actually support creation of a net neutral on an oil and gas site, on top of the fact that renewables at this time, at least in the province of Alberta, only equate for 1.5% of the energy provided by our grid. And at that point, we're still having to subsidize them because consistently and reliably send the amount of energy required. The reason there was a moratorium even on renewables is because you actually need a gas plant backed up behind any of these renewable generators to be able to make sure that if anything happens to the renewables, we still have enough power to provide what's needed in Albertans' homes. Mining companies, Bitcoin mining companies, can become a buyer of first resort to any renewable that's being built, from solar to wind to you name it, and load balance these and generate the revenue for these renewable companies to be able to eventually get to the point of sustainably supplying energy to the grid. We saw it in Texas. 60% of Texas is now on wind, but the money for that infrastructure to get built out, almost $4 billion of it came from the GDP revenue that came from miners who participated in demand response. Like, there's just so many things. I won't go down the insane rabbit hole, but the idea that Bitcoin mining is somehow damaging to the environment is a horrific misconception that's been perpetrated by the media, who doesn't want to spend the time to actually do the research and understand the value that this brings on top of, minting some of the soundest money the world has ever seen.
And I can't say too much on this one because of NDAs and so forth, but what Koleya just said could be applied into food production.
Yes.
I'll just stop there. I'll just stop there. Yeah.
Now,
there you go. Future topics. Yeah. When we can talk about those.
Asset mining is heat. Now, that heat can be used for greenhouses, for in-floor heating, for being able to heat an entire building. So you can use the energy that's already being produced to heat homes and everything else. You can monetize it by minting Bitcoin and use the heat off of it to grow your fruits and vegetables and heat your homes in the winter. There's so much value that can be created out of this one aspect of the industry. It's absolutely incredible.
I'm just going to keep my mouth shut so I don't get in trouble. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we should keep talking more, hey?
Yeah, let's keep talking.
If Hubert can't say anything, let's talk about this more.
But I can't duck out, then I'm in danger. So.
And I know we didn't have the mining aspect of this on our conversation set up for today, but I did. Again, it's on our YouTube channel. There's a very good educational piece that we posted. I posted the actual link there, so if anybody is interested, you can go take a gander at it. So I guess we're running out of time, and maybe we'll get to this last question. And I mean, we've dived into a little bit of the political issues here, at home, around the world. And God, even in the Ozarks, they were diving into it in the last, when I were watching about elections and things along those lines. So I just want, maybe to have the last 15 minutes here, or 10 minutes, whatever we have left. Do you think that blockchain could ever host transparent elections? Like, can it create something secure that people will trust, that they can go, yeah, you know what, here's my vote? Do you think more people will believe it? Do you think that more people will actually vote than the average side of it? So I wouldn't mind just, finishing on something that's political.
I'll speak on my behalf. Is that yes, because there has been so many problems. Like in the last federal election, I had the pleasure of counting the votes as a volunteer. What a crapshoot! What a crapshoot! It's nuts. There's so many ways there could be errors, and that's in a system where most people are honest. Also, you know, like if you think about it, like in Canada, most people try to be honest about these things, and compared to many other countries. And
America.
So, no comment. No comment again. I'm not commenting again. Yeah. So I don't want certain friends over on the other side of the border to give me a call tonight. We desperately need a system like that, so that there's that transparency. There's no reason why we have to wait as long as we do just to get the results, and then having those okay, you know, having, you know, people with really bad hair south of the border challenge the results because it's absolutely a crock of you know what. So it absolutely, I 100% believe that blockchain is actually a extremely good application. That's an extremely good application to leverage blockchain.
Now, will it ever be used for something like elections?
I still think no. I still think it will. It goes back to what I was saying earlier about adoption of technology takes time. And it has to show it's proven. And I think what right now there is still, you know, for certain, again, it could be old school, if you will, thinking is that there's too many, and I've heard this term, fanatics about blockchain, because they only think of it as Bitcoins or something. Like they're not thinking that this is a technology that could be widely used as a tool. So once that stigma, you know, lessons and there's better education and understanding of it, it's a really good application and usage. And you know what's going to happen is that blockchain will be implemented without using the word blockchain, and then all of a sudden all these people say, oh wow, what a great system, because they're looking at just a use case, they're not necessarily understanding the technology behind it. So I'll stop there, and then but this is a great question to get us in trouble just at the very end. Thanks.
This is where you press end.
Really interesting.
Rigging. Good itself for that. We'll see. Considering how ballots have been counted for, you know, since the founding fathers and how many hundreds of years ago, and they've had all kinds of opportunities to show that they could be more transparent, but you know, we shall see.
People get in the way of technology. That's always the biggest problem.
Yeah.
See, that's just it. I mean, Bush was not being in the polls when Gore was going against him, but somehow those new voting machines got put in that same year, and that man managed to get a second term, which was fascinating.
Well, that's because there was no blockchain technology. That's what we're going with, right?
Yeah, in the States.
There's no accountability. There's no accountability there. Yeah. Sorry, Alexis.
It's actually been used in an election, and I just found that out recently, and I thought that was kind of amazing. So there are two.
Please share.
Yes, we share.
Big benefits to using blockchain for elections. First, it allows online voting in a way where you can absolutely confirm the identity of the person voting. This is a big barrier to online voting, which is something that can create a lot more accessibility to participating in elections, and also reduce people who are disenfranchised because they don't have ID. And, you know, even in 2023, this is a huge issue, especially in the States, where especially in low income neighborhoods, people are turned away because they don't have the right identification. So that's one big benefit. The other big benefit is that the votes that are actually cast are all immutably tracked on a digital ledger on blockchain. So that means that they can never be changed. So, and you also have more real-time data about the voting process. So you can get results in a lot quicker. So there's some huge advantages. The use case that I was talking about that's actually already happened was in 2018 in the US in West Virginia, where there was a small pilot where military members who of course are remote and would otherwise have to mail ballots, you know, which is a process that can result in a lot of errors and lost ballots and other issues, were allowed to vote using a blockchain system. And the pilot went extremely well. There are some debates in the States about whether or not it's going to be rolled out for wider use for military members in particular. But it's just got such big advantages for people who aren't physically in their voting district, you know, as well as for the overall integrity, of course, of elections. So really exciting. And, you know, it's actually happened, even if it was just a little pilot.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That is actually that is awesome. I love to hear that. I wish we would have known that a little earlier.
Yeah, because that
I just found out. I had no idea.
I know. It's something you could have shared with us before instead of shocking us all.
She wants us quiet again. She wants us quiet again.
Another drop mic moment. We're all dropped.
I'm not dropping the mic on this one. Pilot. Like, again, there are some. I would love to see the day that Putin runs for an election using blockchain. Okay, like I'm just saying.
John Moon, yeah.
Yeah.
Seriously.
99% voted for him. You know?
They can verify the 99% now.
No, well, actually, I think in North Korea, you'd be very apt to go, yes, I will vote for you, because that man will come into your house after. If
Exactly.
You do
Yeah.
he will
Yeah.
know
Well,
for.
blockchain would still work. The results would still be the same. It's just there's only one person on the ballot, so does that really matter?
That's true.
Same with Putin. That interesting. His opponent raised money in Bitcoin to run his campaign against him because he couldn't do it through the traditional financial system because, governments have power over your money. They have power over, right? So interesting thing. So that's where it's like, maybe in some countries that actually care about democracy, we'd see blockchain used for voting, but I couldn't say I would see that on a global scale.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's challenging.
That's very legit.
Like it.
That's very legit. So
Well,
if Putin using
wouldn't
blockchain,
mind,
is it put block? Is that what we call it? Put block?
What's that?
If Putin is using blockchain to do the voting, it's called put block.
Put block?
Put block.
He's probably got it.
Put block.
Probably got his own coin. I'm guessing.
Could be pegged to gold.
Yes, exactly. I know we're running out of time, and this has been an absolute pleasure to and again, thank you to UN Declaration, thank you to the John Humphrey Center, Renee, everybody on your team for having us here. We didn't practice this, but does anybody want to say something to close it out? Each of your own?
You want to answer? I think there was one other question in here. Anyone want to take a stab at Edward's question at 1457 here?
1457.
All right. So due to large fluctuations in the value of large cryptos such as Bitcoin and Ethereum, many individuals I know are reluctant to hold crypto as a savings in comparison to traditional fiat currency, banking, and investing to yield annual percentage rate. Is there any ways that blockchain can compete with relative stability of fiat currency banking? Oh, I love that you asked this question. So just to give you a hint here. Okay. So inflation, right, basically devalues your currency. So if you look at what are they saying right now? We're in what they call a silent depression. So there was the Great Depression and the Silent Depression. So let me just help you understand that by using these metrics. In the 1930s, the average wage was about $4,500 per person for the year. Doesn't seem like much today. Now, if you adjust for inflation, that average wage is the equivalent to close to $80,000 in 2023. Now, if you look at the average price of a home back in the 1930s was maybe 13 grand. So you made 4,500 a year, your home cost you 13 grand. The average house today is about, and the average Canadian wage is $56,000. Now, there's all these other metrics I can go into, like average price of gas, average cost of food, all these other things. But in the 1930s, they made more and things costed less. Today, the average wage is 56 grand. Your home is $1 million. And the rate of inflation, as much as they want to lie to you at 2 to 3%, is close to 7 to 8 points. So your 1%, 3%, 0.5%, if you're lucky at half the time, rate of fiat savings is debased by 5x what they're willing to give you based on bank savings. Now, if I looked at the last 10 years, what I could buy for $5,000, $10,000 just in the last 10 years is dramatically decreased. But in the last 10 years, my Bitcoin holdings, if I would have held from 2014 to now, I'd be a bloody billionaire. So anyone that thinks that your fiat currency is going to outpace the value that large scale crypto could hold, like Bitcoin, you could not, unless you are, even your income does not outpace inflation at this point. It's the reason why we are in such an economic crisis. Traditional fiat currency systems will not outpace cryptocurrency unlikely to do so in the coming decades to come. I know people seem like hesitant or reluctant to it, but until they start really diving in and studying what's happening in their own current economic system and what's happening with inflation, it's hard to kind of understand and justify why things like Bitcoin or Ethereum or some of the other ones are doing so much better. But I do promise you, look into the silent depression, look into what the cost was in the 1930s, adjust for inflation today, and you will see what's happened with our M0, M1, M2 money supplies, how much money has been introduced and stimulated into the economy, how much that has debased and devalued our currency, and how close we are to tipping over into looking like Venezuela. I would not hold fiat currency for any reason at this point, because it is losing money on an annual basis. Just me personally, but I've studied this for so long now. There's just not a chance. I wouldn't keep my kids' savings in fiat currency any longer because it's that unstable. Jade, I know that's not what you want for closing remarks, but I did want to get to that question because he asked.
I guess I better throw out my toonies and loonies and quotas.
Those are really, really great, just like tokens at some point, it's just like.
Mine have all gone into that green machine at Superstore, and I've got cash and spent it. So that's all gone. But no, Hubert, Alexis, any final thoughts?
My thought is that coming back to that, this is a celebration of the Human Rights Declaration. Is that it was quite the honor to be on this panel to talk about the possibilities of how blockchain can advance the standard of living, advance humanity, and also create that equality that I think we all struggle with. Doesn't matter about your race, your gender, your age, and religion, and so forth. Is that I think that this technology, blockchain, and not just for the use of cryptocurrency, has a lot of applications that over time, and it could be way past when we retire or have retired, that it will show its strength in advancing humanity.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Alexis?
Yeah, I love that. And, it's been a huge honor to be here, part of this fantastic conference, touching on, so many great topics. And I would just say, it's nice that it's such an acknowledgement of the role of data in human rights and building a better world, because it's so fundamental. The way we move information is such a big part of how the world is shaped and how it functions. And if you can't trace information across borders, it's going to be very challenging to have food insecurity or food security. If you can't allow people to own their own personal information somehow, it's going to be very challenging for so many people around the world to access services. And the same goes for things like financial inclusion. We need a world where we have much more control over our own data and so much more visibility into the data in our economic systems if we're going to build a better world. And I think blockchain is a really critical technology for doing this. And there's a saying that I think a lot about, Hubert, to your point about us being at the beginning of a transformation, that wise societies plant seeds knowing that they will never sit under those trees. These are things that are happening for the betterment of the world as a whole and for future generations. And if it does take 50 years for these technologies to gain widespread adoption, then we know that at least we're contributing to that better world.
And I don't need to add anything because this has all been great. And I'd like to let everybody know that if they want more information on the Blockchain Consortium, the website is up there in the comment sections here and in the event chat. I'd like to thank Abbas for reaching out and asking and to me and making that introduction to Renee to say, hey, this would be a great topic for us, and allowing us to bring obviously Hubert and Alexis on, as Koleya and I live this life a lot over the years, and the great things that we are doing at the Canadian Blockchain Consortium. So Alexis, Hubert, Koleya, thank you so much for coming on, sharing your knowledge, and expressing your mind as you actually live this life a lot. So I hope everybody has a great weekend. I hope everybody has enjoyed this conversation. I know I have, and happy weekend to everybody out there. And I guess that's a wrap.
Thanks, Jade, for your great moderation.
Thanks, Jade. Thanks, ladies.
Hey,
Good to see you
bye-bye.
all. Bye-bye.